As a child, watching old school cartoons was probably a favorite pastime of yours. And if you're anything like me, it probably never occurred to you that He-Man's famous power sword, or sword of power if you prefer, had a history that predates him by thousands of years. He simply had this sword, summoned its power, went into battle riding his famous battle cat, and that's all we needed to know or care about at the time. In the original Filmation cartoon, he was bequeathed the sword by the sorceress and became the most powerful man in the universe to protect Eternia from Skeletor and his evil forces. In the original minicomic that came with the vintage figures, the sword is split into two halves, which leads to Skeletor's mission to unite the two and unlock its seemingly unlimited power. Whatever the case, you probably used your imagination in some way, shape, or form while dueling out fight sequences between your Masters of the Universe toys. As for the purpose of this video, we're here today to discuss the expanded lineage of He-Man's power sword as detailed in the Masters of the Universe Classics toy line, which began in 2008. The more cohesive lineage of this sword resulted in several characters who had never gotten previous toy releases, and thus passing the torch, or passing the sword in this case, from one former He-Man to another, which greatly adds to the lore of this franchise. Much of the material in this video draws from several sources, and the figures were sold to me by various friends in my collecting life. Please see the description section of this video for all the credits and sources. Let's begin. Hi everyone, this is Ken with Toy Connections. If you would like to see more figure reviews, figure comparisons, toy histories, collection footage, and toy insights in general, please be sure to hit subscribe, click that notification bell, and press like. In the Classics toy line, the sword was created in the ancient past by the Trollan overlords. Trollans being the same race of beings as our favorite Eternian magician, Orko. Though, to be clear, Orko is used far too much for comic relief to be reflective in nature of the more serious elder Trollans. The overlords selected a peaceful young man named Ro to wield the sword, for which he became the cosmic warrior known as He-Ro. It should be noted that all of this occurred approximately 5,000 years before the birth of Prince Adam. Upon his journey to Eternia, He-Ro came into conflict with the evil Horde and their leader at the time, Horde Prime. Befriending the wise sage Eldor, He-Ro found himself in conflict not only with the Horde, but also with the vicious Snake Man. However, He-Ro would eventually fall in battle, but not before passing his mighty sword to his comrade in arms, King Grayskull, thus beginning the lineage and passing of the sword to various He-Men throughout the eons. While He-Ro was originally intended as part of a cancelled 1987 He-Man series, his overall design was neatly incorporated into the Classics line, and his character was reworked into a contemporary warrior who fought alongside King Grayskull during the Preternia period of the universe's timeline. This 2009 Classics figure comes with a sword as well as a staff containing a spell stone. Mine is colored green, though the variant stones include a purple or a red stone. Interestingly enough, He-Ro is one of the He-Men shown in the 2021 Revelations cartoon, though the exact lineage differs from that of the Masters of the Universe Classics toy line. Now, while not originally the King of Eternia, but the king of the free people who rebelled under the oppressive rule of the Snake Man, King Grayskull proved himself a natural leader. Riding into battle with his ferocious feline known as the Battle Lion, King Grayskull is legendary for his courage and natural fighting prowess. His eventual downfall and death was due to the deception and trickery during a conflict with King Hiss. However, between his wife, the Queen Vina, and the cosmic enforcer Zodak, the mighty sword of power was split in half and its energies contained within an orb of power, thus keeping it out of the hands of evil, and the orb of which would lay beneath Castle Greyskull itself for many generations. As a figure, King Grayskull was released more than once, but this particular release has his main sword, the two halves that are similar to the original toy line, his shield, and the aforementioned orb containing his power. Note that King Grayskull was also added as a character in the short-lived 2002 Mike Young Productions Masters of the Universe cartoon, for which King Grayskull had his own dedicated feature episode. Greyskull's successor would be a northern warrior named Vikor. However, it should be noted that Vikor is known more as a protector of the sword rather than a true wielder of its powers, essentially keeping it safe for the true bloodline heirs of King Grayskull. Famous for his combat with a battle axe and a shield, Vikor, as the He-Man of the North, wasn't a long-term keeper of the sword, though he was a mortal enemy of both the Snake Men as well as the Fighting Foemen, who were essentially the equivalent of ancient Eternian or Preternian pirates. What is notable about Vikor is he was originally presented as an early He-Man concept by designer Mark Taylor, with a Viking-style helmet and clearly looking a lot more like the traditional Conan rather than He-Man. What's cool about this though is seeing the proposed design ending up being brought to life as part of the classic series, but now as a character integrated into the Masters of the Universe lore and thus worked into the lengthy lineage of the Power Sword. At this point, it's not clear what happens to the sword after Vikor's death, but it does find its way into the hands of the Goddess of Eternia somehow. She's a character who is eventually saved by a savage warrior going by the name of Wun-Dar. All of this occurs about 100 years prior to the time of Prince Adam and Princess Adora. Noting Wun-Dar's heroic nature, the goddess gifts him with weapons and armor, and among this were the two halves of the Power Sword that were previously split upon the death of King Grayskull. Wun-Dar the Savage He-Man would then become this era's protector of the Power Sword, much like Vikor was before him. Now, while that is Wun-Dar's story as how it's been worked into the Classics line, the reality of it is that Wun-Dar is based off of the vintage, ultra-rare, brown-haired color He-Man that was dubbed by fans as Wonderbread He-Man. Hence, where the name Wun-Dar comes from. As toy legend goes, he was originally thought of as being part of a promotional mail-away by Wonderbread in the 1980s, but this theory has since been debunked. And it turns out he was actually part of a completely unrelated promotional offer that was done directly by Mattel that had absolutely nothing to do with Wonderbread. Nevertheless, the fan name for this figure has stuck. And hence, the figure comes with some of the traditional standard He-Man weapons, but also a hilarious Wonderbread accessory itself, which is a great homage to the previous working fan theory for the figure itself. Again, another great idea for an esoteric character that was incorporated into the Masters of the Universe Classics line and directly into the lineage of the Keepers of the Power Sword. As a personal taste, I actually think that Wun-Dar goes very well with Scareglow, partly due to the rarity of both of the original figures, and also due to these characters' similarity in appearance to the main characters of He-Man and Skeletor. After this, we jump now to the time period where King Randor and Keldor, aka Skeletor, are now in their prime, and the He-Man of this period would be Oo-Lar. What's notable here is that the Masters of the Universe Classics, in a way, retconned Oo-Lar to be the Jungle He-Man of the original mini-comics. And while I personally have no problem accepting this, the mini-comics can be very much seen as their own continuity separate from the Classics line, both of which have a different continuity from the Filmation cartoon, or the 2002 cartoon, or the Revelations cartoon, and so on. As a Classics character, Oo-Lar was a tribal hero who saved the goddess, and much like Vikor and Wun-Dar before him, he was bestowed the Power Sword and was the last He-Man to protect it before the birth of Prince Adam. Uniting both halves of the Power Sword, the sword was then cloned and thus results in a second one, dubbed the Sword of Protection, that is given to Princess Adora so that she can become She-Ra. As you can see, the design of Oo-Lar is very Tarzan-esque, much in the same way that Vikor was very Conan-like. Now, the decision to consider Oo-Lar as the original mini-comics Jungle He-Man can be a bit controversial, as it effectively means that the Jungle He-Man in our original mini-comics is not the same as the primary He-Man we've come to know, but it still adds an interesting layer to the backstory. This is something that is accepted by some fans, but not by others, but as a fan of this franchise, you be your own judge. Having said that, I don't personally see this being any different than the retroactive continuity changes that have occurred in other franchises. For example, think of the characters with convoluted rich histories by famous comic publishers. After all, the fans of DC did come to accept that the Golden Age Superman was retconned to be called Superman of Earth 2, while the Superman that was used for later stories was effectively called Superman of Earth 1. As we move forward to the He-Man most familiar to us, as in the heroic, alter ego of Prince Adam, it's safe to say he doesn't really need much introduction. An icon of the 1980s, Prince Adam and twin sister Adora are the true destined heroic heirs of King Grayskull. And whether you remember him from your childhood toy battles, the original Filmation cartoon, or other various forms of media, this character has reached true legendary status in terms of barbarian-themed franchises. This 2008 release is among the early figures in the Masters of the Universe Classics line, but sadly I notice his ankle joints are a bit weak, which can make him a bit hard to stand up at times. But in general, I like to display him riding Battle Cat to get around this issue. Ultimately, this video doesn't really have any new information on this series' main character, as this brand is entirely built around him. After all, he's the He-Man. He's mentioned here mainly because of his importance in the line of succession when it comes to the Keepers of the Power Sword. Having said that, the He-Man that most of us know isn't the last in the line of the He-Men released in this toy line. Hero II, or Dare as he's sometimes called, was released as a figure as well, and is actually the son of He-Man and Teela. Following Skeletor's defeat at the hands of He-Man, the story here is that the evil Trollan known as the Unnamed One has revitalized his own power and sought to do battle with whomever carried the power sword. What happens here is that Dare goes back in time, begins training with legendary figures from his past, and ultimately defeats the Unnamed One once and for all. And with that, I've really grown to appreciate that the He-Man that we've come to know has developed a history to the point that he had a legit heir to his seat in the Royal Palace of Eternia. This figure does come with an alternate torso attire if you do choose to change it out. And now at this point, I've done my best to summarize the 7 He-Men in my personal collection who were released as part of the toy line, but I'd also like to give a quick side note here. For those who have followed the Classics line closely, Vikor is often thought of as one of the various He-Men in history, like the others that I've shown here. This is largely due to the fact that he resembles the initial Barbarian presentation figure that designer Roger Sweet put together in the early 1980s before the eventual He-Man figure was developed. Now, in actuality, for the Classics continuity, Vikor is a gladiator who fought in arenas and served as an entertainment spectacle for Lord Chollo, this time coming about 50 years before the days of Prince Adam. Ultimately though, being a gladiator is the extent of his role in this particular series, so thus Vikor has nothing to do with the power sword or its line of succession. Having said that, due to his design history and the fact that he aesthetically looks the part, it's not a stretch at all to display him with the official He-Man on your shelf. He's the type of character that, depending on how the future Masters of the Universe continuities are reworked and shaped, could probably be worked into the Lineage of the Sword somehow. Anyway, I just thought that was an interesting side bit to address. Overall, the existence of the 2008 Masters of the Universe Classics line gives us access not only to a whole range of characters that had never been previously made into toys, but also an expanded history of the He-Man that existed before and after Prince Adam. The result is a greatly enriched history and mythos surrounding our main heroes, thereby giving us a highly important cast of supporting characters. And I hope that the detailed lineage outlined here today was both interesting and insightful for you as fans of this franchise. Now, if you enjoyed this video, feel free to have a look at some of my other content here. Please like and share this with your fellow He-Man collectors, and I'll see you again soon with some more of my favorite toys. Take care.